What's more troubling about the French government at the moment is its tendency towards inconsistency. Wanting to send armed troops is inconsistent when it's known that there are neither troops nor weapons to fight with. This isn't a lie. It's the exercise of magical thinking. Wishing alone isn't enough to gain control of reality. Another glaring example, France, with the blessing of the European Union, sets the goal of reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by a factor of 6 by 2050, roughly within 25 years. At the end of 2023, according to Emmanuel Macron, France reduced its CO2 emissions by 4.3%. However, if we take the GDP minus the state deficits and the deficits of foreign trade to obtain the real growth, we get around 0.9%, or approximately 30 billion minus 100 billion in budget deficit minus 100 billion in external deficit, resulting in a balance of 170 billion, roughly around a 5% decrease. Just by looking at it, we realize that the decrease in CO2 emissions is strictly correlated with the decrease in wealth produced in France. And it's quite logical, considering that wealth production is closely correlated with energy consumption, and the energy we consume is mainly fossil fuel, which we don't know how to replace on a large scale with non-fossil fuels. There's nuclear energy, but for political reasons, the European Union has abandoned it. Even Switzerland has made this mistake, but there's a looming vote to backtrack on the issue. So, there's hope for Switzerland. To come back to France and the current state of affairs, reducing CO2 emissions by a factor of 6 would mean reducing available wealth in France by a factor of 6. So, to rephrase, the project is to become extremely poor. If you divide the GDP per capita by 6, you go back, in terms of available wealth, to the 1930s. Not 2030, mind you, but 1930. Now, of course, this would be somewhat different because the French would still have the internet in 2050, but it means that 20% to 30% of the active population would work in agriculture, vacations within 100 kilometers from home would become the norm again, and everything you could buy would cost at least 6 times more compared to current wages. Well, maybe housing would cost less, and all technological items would probably cost more than 6 times. But you get the idea. Furthermore, this conflict's netween Russia and France. There is a question about the direction of our society. Are we willing to prioritize immediate comfort and convenience over long-term sustainability and resilience? It seems that many are inclined towards the former, seeking quick fixes and avoiding the discomfort of change, even if it means jeopardizing our collective future. Jean-Marc Jancovicis Pascal's wager, proposing that sacrificing growth for environmental preservation will lead to a successful reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, relies heavily on the assumption that all major global players will adopt a similar mindset. However, the reality is far from certain. Nations like Russia, China, and the USA are driven by ambitions for economic growth and global dominance, often at the expense of environmental concerns. In this context, it's troubling to witness governments like France's refusing to confront reality. With staggering debt and limited access to essential resources like energy, they're still willing to engage in conflicts like the one with Russia, despite lacking the necessary means and public support. This disconnect between rhetoric and capability underscores the dangerous allure of magical thinking in policymaking. Moreover, while there's a desire to avoid the hardships of climate change and energy scarcity, sacrificing economic dynamism may prove to be a short-sighted solution. The Minister of Economy's frustration at the EU's lagging growth compared to the USA reflects this dilemma. It's emblematic of a continent grappling with its decline, where wishful thinking replaces pragmatic decision-making. This trend isn't isolated to France alone. It's a pan-European issue. The decline observed in Germany, another industrial powerhouse, serves as a sobering reminder of the consequences of allowing fantasy to dictate policy. As magical thinking infiltrates energy policy and geopolitical strategies, the future of these nations hangs in the balance. In conclusion, it's imperative that we confront the realities of our time with honesty and courage. Ignoring the challenges ahead or relying on unrealistic solutions will only exacerbate our problems. It's time for Europe, and the world at large, to abandon magical thinking and embrace the hard truths necessary for sustainable progress. And as we navigate these uncertain waters, let's remember to thank viewers for their engagement and encourage further discussion on these critical issues.